Holbrook, Holbrook, with the Gainesville Police Department.
So, Sergeant, you guys had some unfortunate circumstances. Describe what has happened tonight.
Unfortunately, around 5:37 p.m. tonight, we received a 911 call in the area of West Avenue at Comer Street in regards to a pedestrian that was hit by a vehicle. Emergency medical personnel as well as law enforcement personnel headed to the scene. The fire department, emergency medical personnel were the first to arrive on scene. They then found some witnesses, some individuals who stated that a male subject, an adult male, had actually walked into their vehicle. And then some odd behavior, some odd encounters with this individual. The individual had kind of walked into the vehicle and made it look as if though that maybe they had hit him with the vehicle. Again, this is information that we're still developing right now, just based off of what the actual 911 call was. So the first responders, the medical personnel, then attempted to locate the victim. The witnesses stated that the victim did have some prior injuries to actually walking into the vehicle. They were concerned for him just due to those injuries as well as his odd behavior. During that encounter of this individual, who was the supposed victim at that time, and these individuals in the car, the suspect, actually the victim at the time, walked off and into a wooded area along the road here. West Avenue, there are a number of homes located through here, and then a wooded area, and then there's an apartment complex back there. So the emergency medical personnel immediately began to look for this individual because they were told that he had some injuries. As they began to look for the individual, they came across him in a wood line close to some residents here along West Avenue. During that encounter, the individual actually stated that he wanted the medics' help. He stated he needed their help, at which point he began to again act very peculiar, not as though your average prudent person would during that encounter with fire personnel, medical personnel. At that point, the individual then pulled a knife from his pocket. He then became a knife-wielding suspect, threatening the paramedics, threatening the fire department, threatening those that were there to actually assist him. During that encounter, law enforcement personnel from the Gainesville Police Department began arriving on scene. They then were able to put themselves between the firefighters, the paramedics, and this perpetrator, this subject that was wielding a knife. The officers began de-escalation measures. They continued with those de-escalation measures, and unfortunately they simply did not work. This individual charged at the officers with a knife, and unfortunately one of our officers did have to discharge their firearm, striking the individual. The individual was transported to the trauma center at Northeast Georgia Medical Center in serious condition.
What were the nature of the injuries prior to his wielding the knife? Do we know?
From dispatch accounts, it stated that he had some injuries possibly to his arms, some bleeding through his head. The callers did advise that he did appear to be intoxicated. He did appear to be inebriated. But again, that's a part of this investigation. The GBI is currently on scene. They are here processing the scene. They will be the lead agency for this investigation, and we do appreciate their help in this investigation.
Was there more than one of your officers on the scene there when this shooting occurred?
So we did have a number of officers en route just due to the mere nature of the call.
Sure.
As far as the number of officers that were on scene, I do not know that. I know that there were more than one officer here. But one officer attempting those de-escalation measures did fire his weapon, striking the subject.
It was just the one officer?
Yes, yes, just one officer was fired.
And we've heard initial points of a hit and run. This would not be qualified as a hit and run.
So initially the 911 call stated that there was possibly a hit and run. But it didn't appear to be your typical hit and run. Typically when we hear hit and run, we hear of a vehicle hitting someone and then leaving the accident. This was the actual individual, the pedestrian, hit the vehicle and then left the scene. So it was a hit and run of sorts, just not what your typical hit and run.
The opposite.
Yes. But this is again one of those peculiar cases. It's one of those where as we develop more information, it really brings on more questions. What was this individual's actually doing? What were his intentions? Someone that would actually threaten firefighters. Let's face it, everyone loves firefighters. They're the guys, the heroes that come out to save the day, and that's exactly what they were doing here, to protect this guy, to save this guy. And unfortunately, we as law enforcement had to do what we do, and that's serve and protect. Our officers had to protect those firefighters. The last thing that we would want are those firefighters ending up in the back of that ambulance, those paramedics in the back of that ambulance in which they work every day as a victim. And that's what these officers unfortunately had to step in the middle of today. This is a sad and very unfortunate situation.
Were any of the first responders injured as due to this?
We're very fortunate that none of the first responders were injured in this incident. This could have been very, very different. And of course, yet it is a still very sad and unfortunate outcome. But those firefighters get to go home to their families tomorrow. As you can imagine, this is a very traumatizing situation for them, as well as the officers. We in law enforcement, first responders, we're used to seeing the worst of the worst. But when you put yourself in that position, it really changes how you look at things. It really changes how, your perspective on things. And these guys, I can tell you now, they're not going to sleep tonight. They're going to go back to the station, and there's no doubt in my mind that they're going to be up all night thinking about this, as well as that officer that's at the hospital right now, going through a very traumatic injury. And when we say that, it's not an injury in which that they can recover from. It's not the same thing as a broken arm where it's going to heal. These are types of injuries that the